Welcome to the Calder Farmstead, your place for news, analysis, and shenanigans from the American Hockey League.
Face off one by the Condors, Jones, top, another point fence into the slot, a shot is gone! Josh Perry, in double,
left point, long drive, safety running, what a stop by Matisse with the left pad! Oh, there was a scramble in front of the net, denied was Matt Schicker by a miraculous piece of net binding by Matisse Kinetic.
Later from the red line sends it in, Hofer in the net, he stops it, Hofer looking, Hofer firing toward the empty net, he scores! Are you kidding me? Joel Hofer, a goalie goal in the Calder Cup Playoffs!
And now, with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out. Right side with Fair. Brooks Light cutting to the net. Fair, and let's go! He scored! He scored! It's over!
Hello from Springfield, Massachusetts.
And Chicago, Illinois.
Welcome to the Calder Farmstead podcast, episode number 139 for Thursday, May 11th, 2023. You were hoping for a podcast featuring breech birth instructions. We are not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast. My name is Sean O'Brien from StatsTrack. I'm the AHL's only league-wide analytics guy.
And I'm Sarah Avampato from Full Press Hockey and SB Nation's Canes Country.
As always, we thank you for tuning in with us. And if you're new to hearing Sarah and I talk about hockey, we're going to recap the second round of the AHL's Calder Cup Playoffs quickly, then preview the third round of the AHL's Calder Cup Playoffs. We both watch a lot of AHL games, and we talk about what we see when we watch the film, as well as use some advanced stats to help us break it down. If that's new to you, you might want to head over to our podcast feed or YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to us from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to be talking about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're new to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms, like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries or Royal Road, go check that out so you're going to be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes, and let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes hiring a president of hockey ops that has no experience in an NHL front office. Can you imagine another industry hiring someone with an empty resume in the related experience category to run your billion-dollar product? You'll never get that time back. So next time, why not spend a little bit more time with us talking hockey? We do have one kind of notable piece of news to discuss before we get into brass tacks here. We have a couple of coaching hires that we're going to push off to another day because this is already probably going to be a 2-hour episode. And, well, you guys have better things to do with your lives. We obviously don't, but that's our problem. But Scott Howson did survive. He got a contract extension, a multi-year contract extension. Right behind me there, this direction, yeah, it's like somewhere in here, maybe. But Elliot Friedman reporting that he got a multi-year extension. The AHL then released their own press release saying basically the same thing. Interestingly enough, I thought from the press release, after all that talk about independent teams being not happy with him, the person they chose for a quote to say, like, we're happy with Scott Howson was the head of an independent team in Charlotte in Tara Black. Also, Elliot Friedman reporting on the 32 Thoughts podcast that the NHL was not happy that AHL teams tried to handle this internally and didn't, notify the league right away of what they were doing. And I'm imagining that someone in the NHL front office, maybe someone whose name rhymes with Shmeri Metman, gave someone a good yelling at over the phone, but in like a polite way. But I definitely can see the NHL not being happy that someone, teams were trying to mess around and commit a mutiny without the NHL's knowledge. Like, should they have actually pulled that off? I have to imagine there would be like actual emotion from Gary Bettman in public. Sarah, what thoughts did you have on this going down and ultimately ending up being nothing like we thought it would be?
Yeah, I mean, not a surprise that, he got the extension. It would have been fascinating had he not gotten extended, but this is hockey. That's not what's going to happen. It still feels to me like one or two people had a beef about something and didn't feel like they were being heard. And so went to whoever to get it out there in the media, and then became a whole thing. It's something I feel like we're never going to know the details about why there was all this weird drama rumor stuff, but at the end of the day, they made the right decision. Like, this league doesn't need the upset of, oh, surprise, you need a new guy now. No one has time for that.
No, we barely have time for it in this episode. So yeah, this felt like we talked about it the last time we talked about this a couple weeks ago, where it seemed like things were still moving. It's like, should we maybe be caring more about this? Like, is this something we're going to look back on when Scott Howson is no longer the president? Be like, man, we should have thought this was more serious, and we didn't. And no, we were wrong. This was, and maybe in hindsight, those second thoughts were not merited. But I agree with you. This definitely feels like there were a handful of people who were very not happy, and a couple other independent teams were like, let's see where this goes a little bit. Chicago clearly seemed to be one of them. Like, they said they were not taking the lead on this, but that's a very particular choice of words from Wendell Young, who is not someone who's usually coy. So that was some interesting phrasing. Maybe he'll come back on the podcast over the summer and we'll discuss. There have been some other rumors about Chicago and the independence thing, but nothing that's been more than whispers. So we'll leave that for another time as well. Sarah, let's get right into it. We have a lot to cover here. We have an entire second round to recap, and then an entire third round to preview, as there are only 8 teams left. Let's get right into it. We will start east to west, Atlantic to Pacific, and tackle first the Providence Bruins and the Hartford Wolfpack. Hartford continued to just outwork, out-hustle, and out-execute another favored team, as they have clearly embraced the phone booth knife fight mentality, especially in a series where an actual knife fight may have only been a 2-minute penalty. And even then, probably not if the game was tied or in the third period or something like that. I thought Brandon Bussey did everything he could here to keep the P Bruins afloat, but a relentless forecheck and physical pressure was too much for a Providence team that didn't look too interested in fighting back until they were down 0-2 in the series. And that's always going to be a mistake in a best of 5, first to 3. You can't let the other side get up 2 before you decide you maybe want to care. So let's first talk about what we got wrong here. One of our keys was Boston not stealing players. And not only did that not happen, Boston sent down Jacob Lauko after getting bounced by Florida, a thing that we were like, no, Boston will take care of business in probably game 5, a gentleman's sweep. And nope, no. So, is that really an L for us? It doesn't matter. I'm taking it because we just all wrote off Florida. We looked brilliant there. The other thing I would say I think we missed on, we talked about Providence not getting caught puck watching. I don't feel like they really did that in this series. There were some times in which there was a goal that just went right through, players, but I don't think it was as prominent as it was in the Hartford series against Springfield. Providence, while not exactly full-assing their efforts, I don't feel like they were that lackadaisical where it was just left, right, and center. How are these passes getting through? And they lost the series anyway, so I will take that L there. In terms of what we got right, Hartford setting the tone early. They definitely caught Providence with rink rust in game 1 and probably even into game 2. And that's not to take away from the effort that Hartford put on, but the days off definitely impacted Providence, and Hartford jumped all over that and gave them hell. We got right that Hartford, if they could play special teams to a draw, that would be huge for them. In 3 of the 4 games, they did that. The only game where either team scored a power play goal was game 3. Hartford did not win that game. Every other game was penalty kill shutout for both sides. That's a draw on special teams. So the other thing we were right about is Providence needed atmosphere, and they did not get it. There were people in the stands, sure, but the building was sterile enough to do surgery in. The 2 home games they played in Providence were the smallest and third smallest crowds of the entire season for Providence. These were Friday and Saturday games. They had 12 days to promote. Could the fans in attendance have been rowdier? Yeah, of course. But it's also hard to get the crowd going when you're, one of 15 people in your section that accommodates 45. it's kind of hard to turn around and like do the, let's go motion, and there's no one there. Like we said in the preview that this was a playoff hockey game and not the Rhode Island Country Club. Well, the Rhode Island Country Club atmosphere would have been an upgrade. Like they host weddings there, and some of those definitely get down. But I don't put this on the fan base. I put this on the P Bruins front office, which has never done an impressive job marketing the team since we've started this podcast. Like their social media is bare bones at best, and I struggle to imagine they do so in the local media market, that they do a better job promoting this team and getting people interested, because every time I watch, even when their building is like full, it still very much feels like a corporate awards banquet kind of thing, where it's like everyone's excited, but it doesn't have the atmosphere. Whereas like when Coachella Valley scores a big goal, I can see their camera shake because the building is that loud and the building is that alive. Like you don't get that. Abbotsford, same way, just massive crowds. Everyone goes nuts. That's not Providence, and it hasn't been for a while. And that's on their front office. They need to do a better job. Last thing I'd say we got correct here was our X factor was transition. And I mean, nearly every goal in this series had the sequence begin with either a forechecking success or a rush chance created by fast puck movement in transition. Hartford dominated with their forechecking games 1 and 2, and Providence started to find answers in game 3, but that was Johnny come lately. Sarah, any thoughts from this series as a whole?
I said no one can say I told you so whenever my pick of Providence was wrong, and no one can say I told you so. Like this was a surprise, but also, I mean, Hartford they won this series fair and square, and good for them.
I think so. There are some people in the officials who would argue fair and square, but
yeah,
anyway,
that's a different podcast.
We have a whole nother Atlantic Division series to talk about, the Hershey Bears and Charlotte Checkers. Sarah, what happened here?
All right, so Hershey won this series in 4 games, and overall they really just finished on their chances at a much better rate than Charlotte did. Shots overall for the series were 95-92 in favor of Hershey. Home plate shots 47-50 in favor of Charlotte, so pretty even there. The shooting percentage, however, on those home plate shots, Hershey 26%, Charlotte 10%. So there's your difference maker right there. Some of that is a difference in goaltending. Hunter Shepard is a much better goaltender than either Matt Guzda or JF Berube. And some of that's really because Hershey's second line center is Connor McMichael and Charlotte's second line center is Connor Bunneman. So, that's how it goes. What did we? Yeah. What did we miss in this series? Well, Charlotte needed to find new heroes, and they didn't. They lost this series, but I still think we should take the L here on this one. Charlotte didn't find any heroes in this series. We said that Florida being down 3-2 in the series against Boston meant that it was going to be likely that Zach Dalpe and Alex Lyon would return because the Panther season was going to be over. I also, like the rest of the hockey universe, deserves an L for that one because that is clearly not what happened. Florida instead did the funniest possible thing and won that series. So, oops. I'd also say that I gained a lot of respect for Jordy Kinnear in these playoffs. He did a tremendous job of implementing a game plan, keeping Charlotte alive in both playoff series where they were just really heavily outgunned talent-wise. Now, this series probably looks a lot different if Boston finished Florida in overtime in Game 5 and they got their reinforcements back into Charlotte for Game 1. Does Charlotte win this series then? I don't know. But I think it's unlikely that Alex Lyon lets in all 4 of those goals against in game number 2. So it could have changed the complexion of this series. All in all, I thought Charlotte's coaching staff did a good job in the series, finding ways to create chances and limit Hershey's chances. In the end, though, they just didn't have the horses necessary to pull off that upset. So what did we get right? In this one, Hershey, by and large, avoided bad penalties. Charlotte had 10 power plays over 4 games, scored just 1 power play goal. None of the penalties that Hershey took even seemed like the egregious, what were you thinking kind of penalties. And that is pretty good discipline from Hershey to be in that position. And Hershey did something on the power play. Sure, going 0-5 in Game 3 was not great. Overall, their power play is still a mess. But 2-14 on the power play definitely qualifies as doing something. No, not really counting that empty net goal, power play goal that Hershey scored as a true power play goal. It is a goal that existed, but whatever. Their 5-forward power play unit on their first unit is a great idea, but if Sam Annis isn't one of those 5 forwards, then what is the point? He's really the only one who seems to be able to complete railroad passes or passes into the slot area. Their power play just needs a ton of work and is still entirely too static and predictable, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Hershey also contained Charlotte in transition. It's a qualified success here, but it's still a success. They kept Charlotte from flying through the neutral zone in transition by and large. Yeah, they struggled against the forecheck, but not enough to really tip the balance of the series. Overall, Hershey wasn't great here, but they were good enough to count it, in my opinion, as a win for us. Also, the goaltending X factor. That one came through for us as well. Matt Guzda wasn't able to save Charlotte's season for a second series in a row, and there's really going to be a big what if about if Alex Lyon was able to play. That one's going to linger for a little bit here in reflecting back on this series. Do stand by the fact that playing Shepherd back-to-back games was really taking an unnecessary risk. When a team like Utica does it, it makes more sense because the drop-off from Nico Dawes to Isaac Poulter is significant, and a tired Dawes is still very likely the sharper goaltender in that tandem. Shepherd is the better goalie compared to Zach Fakal, but acting like he is chopped liver is just bizarre to me. Teams successfully play both goaltenders in the Calder Cup playoffs all of the time. Both finalists from last season in Chicago and Springfield did it. In 2019, same thing. Charlotte and Chicago both played both of their goalies. In 2018, Toronto started both their goalies as well. And those 5 out of 6 are just among teams who went to the Calder Cup finals. If you look deeper, I'm sure there's going to be other examples as well. But this is not the NHL where if you change goalies, it's a whole big thing. That it happens all the time in this league. And it's why you don't do it, I don't know. Also, Jeff Berube looked cooked. His movement, his ability to get post to post, or go from the change position at the post to the top of his crease and make the saves just isn't there anymore. He's going to be 32 at the beginning of next summer. Posted his 3rd consecutive AHL season, well below league average in terms of save percentage. If this isn't it for him, I don't know what happened. I have to imagine that this is probably his last shot here at the league.
Yeah, and I think that's for JF Berube, you've had a good career. Letting go at the end is always the thing that seems like a lot of career players struggle with because they don't know what to do next.
Yeah. But
him, and we'll talk about someone else too, watching the first round of the playoffs where it's I think this is the end for them. It looked like JF Berube was one of them where it looked like if he had to go down and move post to post to make a save, that if he made the save, it was not because he skilled that save into existence. But I agree with you. I think Hershey choosing to play Hunter Shepherd in both back-to-backs was risky. Bears fans did not like that assessment, but that doesn't surprise me. But it is teams that do it usually are doing it in a sense where it's our other goaltender is nowhere near the same guy. The fact that Zach Fucale had a worse season than Hunter Shepherd, but he still put up, I think, a 903, 904, in the regular season. That's not horrible. Mm-hmm. That's a viable goaltender still. But whatever, here we are. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about the Marlies and Comets series. We'll start with what happened here. Pretty obviously, Toronto won the series in 4 games. It seemed like the series shifted a lot after Game 2, and it shifted to Toronto's favor, which is not how I think anyone expected it to go. Getting blown out at home and then going to the other team's barn for Games 3 and 4, that's usually a script for your season is over in 2 more games and not a date with the 3rd round. But this Marlies team has been resilient all offseason and once again found their game through, embarrassment on home ice and turned that into a series win. But let's get into the mistakes we made in our analysis. I think we underestimated the role of depth scorers in this matchup. Once Nolan Foote went out with injury, the offense just could not find its groove. They couldn't finish chances in Utica. Ryan Schmelzer, Tyce Thompson, Jace Howryluk, Joe Gambardella combined for 1 point and just 10 shots in games 3 and 4. They needed to do more. Arni Talviti felt like the only one in the last 2 games of the series that was out there consistently making an impact shift to shift, game to game. Holtz was good, but Holtz needed to be good. And even still, I don't think he was great. It still felt like he left effort on the table. Whereas on the Marley side, they had guys stepping up left, right, and center. Ryan Szaszowski had 2 goals, 1 assist for 3 points in the series. Blandisi and Abrazizi were both big in the series. Semyon Dargachintsev, Pontus Holmberg as well. Topi Niemela playing his 10th AHL game ever played well. I think that's something we didn't factor in, and it definitely played a role in this series. So I'm going to take that as an L for us. Keith Petruzzelli did, in fact, not step up, but Eric Källgren came back from the Leafs and played lights out, which I sure wasn't expecting after what he did in the regular season this year. Goaltending, as always, continues to be voodoo. So while I'll take the L here on Petruzzelli, I at least think we were right in concept that a Marlies goalie needed to find their A game. We just didn't get the correct one. And while fair or not, I say all the time, you need to be landing in the playoffs, and we missed the mark there. And whether it's fair or not, that's the way it goes down. But let's talk about what we got right. We said that Toronto's special teams needed to carry the day, and I felt like they did early in the series. To be fair, though, they only got 4 opportunities in the last 2 games of the series. So the fact that they didn't score another power play goal on 4 opportunities is not really saying much. We also talked about how that might be a problem if they didn't get opportunities. So I call that a win, since their overall success in the special teams in the series definitely helped them power them to a game 1 win, and that turned out to be pretty critical. But I think the Marlies showing they could win playoff games in a hostile road environment with 5-on-5 play, that matters. That was a problem in the regular season for them, and for them to go into Utica and win this series with 5-on-5 play is important. We also got right that Utica cannot take bad penalties. And we'll start with, was this a well-officiated series? No, not really. I feel like you could just blindly pull names out of a hat for a second-round series and make clear, video-based examples of that's a missed penalty and this is a missed penalty. And the second round is not the beautiful exemplar of officiating that the AHL might have hoped it would be. But especially in this Utica-Toronto series, game number 2 is one of the more bizarrely officiated games I've ever seen. But by and large, the penalties Utica took were actual penalties by and large. That one off the face-off in game 2 will forever be a head-scratching moment. And I think there are 1 or 2 others. There's like, that was the call? Okay. But by and large, those were actual penalties. This is also a series we said that Mason Gertzen needed to be left in the press box, as he wasn't going to add anything. That was something Kevin Zanine should have done. Gertzen isn't good either as a forward or defenseman. He gets out of position chasing hits, doesn't have offensive skills to offset that defensive black hole. I would say he was directly responsible for at least 2 goals against in the game 3 and game 4. The other thing Comets did not do is keep the Marlies in check in the neutral zone. 9 of the Marlies' 15 goals, excluding empty net goals in that 15 count, 9 of 15 were off rush chances. There's just not much more to say about that. Utica's rush defense and forecheck got absolutely smoked in 3 out of 4 games here. And that very much contributed to their downfall. The other thing we got right in the series, Logan Shaw X Factor, 4 goals and an assist for 5 points in the series, was all over the place. He was dominant Logan Shaw, and that absolutely mattered in how things went. Yes, the Marlies got contributions, top down and bottom up, but Logan Shaw still very much was the thumb on the scale impact player they needed him to be. Sarah, any thoughts before we move on to the 2-week-long Atlantic series or North Division series that happened?
I mean, I think the other thing that stood out to me about that Toronto series is I know one of the things that we were thinking about was like, how are the Toronto Maple Leafs going to mess this up for the Marlies? And by and large, they didn't. I think we both expected much more tinkering from the Maple Leafs with the Marlies, and that didn't happen. And in fact, they gave them back Eric Kallgren, who kind of saved their butts a little bit. So I guess like kudos to the Toronto Maple Leafs for like not doing the thing I thought they were going to do, which is just completely bone their AHL team for no reason.
Well, there's still plenty of runway left in that Florida Panthers series, hopefully. So they haven't tinkered and screwed it up
yet.
All right, let's move on and talk about Syracuse and Rochester really quickly here. We are already taking up so much time. We have so much more to talk about. But what happens is Rochester reverse sweeps Syracuse in a wild series that took place over 2 full weeks, which is insane. Another great what if here. Like, Sarah, do you think Rochester still wins the series if Game 3 was Wednesday the 26th, Game 4 was Friday the 28th, and Game 5 was Sunday the 30th instead? Like, having almost an entire week to practice and strategize between Game 2 and 3 and Game 4 and 5, like, that's insane to me, especially with the momentum shifts in this series. Like, an entire week basically between. I mean, it was, I think, 6 days. It was a Saturday to Friday or something like that. So, but like, serious question here, Sarah. Do you think that like, if this was a regularly scheduled playoff series, that Rochester definitely still wins?
No, this is one I would love to like chuck in a time machine or something, or like visit whatever multiverse has this series that takes place in a normal frame of time. Because those extra time breaks, like everything about this series was just weird. And I think that if you repeat it in a normal, in the way a playoff series normally happens, I don't know that you get the same result. I feel like that had more of an influence than like, we can quantify. Like there's no math for that one.
I also feel too that like that this is basically a British chef that's a big ass hat.
Gordon Ramsay? No, the other one.
The other one.
Yeah.
That like the one meme of him where it's like or in one frame he's like, "You stupid donkey," and the other one he's like, "Come here, precious, it's gonna be okay." I feel like that's the AHL scheduling games where it's like, "You stupid donkey, no, you get a Tuesday and Thursday home playoff series," and it's like, "Oh, Rochester, Utica, you poor girl, like." Here, all weekend games just for you. That's Gordon Ramsay, right?
I think so.
I don't know. I try and ignore British people as much
later.
as possible. So I'm Irish. What do you want from me? All right, let's talk about what we missed here. Alex Barré-Boulet had 9 points in 5 games. He scored, I think, a hat trick in one game, and that was still not enough to win. The Amerks did a very poor job of containing him, but they won the series anyway. He was basically the leader every way for the Crunch. He has another year on his contract, but I don't know why he'd stay in the Tampa organization at this point. Like, he's been one of the best forwards in the AHL for the better part of 4 seasons, and he just gets cups of coffee in the NHL each season, playing like 4th line minutes with no power play time. Like, he's another one who has nothing left to prove in the AHL and is just kind of stuck there because Tampa's depth chart is, well, one befitting a team that's a perennial cup contender, and it needs its bottom 6 to play a style that's nowhere near what Alex Barré-Boulet does. Like, they need guys like Mikey Asamont or who's the guy they paid all the draft picks for?
That guy, Nashville, Milwaukee guy.
Tanner.
Yes.
I knew I'd get there eventually. I'm like, I know the name, I just can't think of it.
Yeah.
Like, those guys do not play and do what Alex Barré-Boulet does, and that's why he basically just gets, shunned in Tampa, because the minutes he needs to play, they have guys like Braden Point or Kucherov or, like those guys. And Alex Barré-Boulet is a great hockey player. He's not one of them. But yeah, we said if they didn't contain him, they were going to lose. They didn't, and they won anyway. I also want to bring this up in the things we got wrong. I don't think it counts as a miss, but it feels like this is the appropriate place to talk about it inside our structure here. It definitely felt like the turning point in the series was the Gabriel Dumont knee-on-knee hit in Game 2. Syracuse was blowing Rochester out of the water up until that point in Game 2. And while Rochester lost that game, like that seemed to be a catalyst moment for them waking the F up and playing hard. They went on to win the rest of the series. 2 of those games Dumont was suspended for. Cedarquist also didn't play in any of the games afterward. But that moment just feels like a rallying point for the Amerks, and that got the snowball rolling downhill and picking up momentum along the way. Sarah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those ones that, we couldn't have predicted it. There was no way we could think like, oh, no, what's going to happen. But I think that did have a lot of influence on, the way this series went, the way that it motivated players. It's another part of the let's put this in a time machine and see what happens if this doesn't happen.
Yeah, a lot of what ifs from the second round of the playoffs so far. But let's move on and talk about what we got right here. Obvious one, Rochester got power plays, and those powered them to a win. Combined in games 3 through 5, the Amerks went 5 for 13 on the power play. All 3 game-winning goals were power play goals. Rochester continues to need power play work to win games, which continues to be concerning. But when something is working, and we said that was what they needed, that's a dub for us. One of the other things that we got right in the Syracuse needed this and didn't get it and lost was consistent goaltending. And this is another one of those where I'm just like, I don't know what happened here. I don't understand why Max Lagacé was the starter for the series in the first place. Hugo Alnefelt was quite clearly the better goalie in the regular season, and it's not like Lagacé down the stretch was like super awesome. He let up 9 goals in his last 2 starts in the regular season. It was also a weird decision to play Lagacé in Game 4 specifically. Like, I don't know how you see his, like, don't get me wrong, he made big saves in Game 3, but you can't see his play in the third period of Game 3 and think, like, that's definitely my guy still. Especially when, again, Alnefelt had the better regular season by a pretty wide margin. I can only assume here that Hugo had an injury that was bad enough to keep him from starting, but not enough to want to dress Jack LaFontaine as the backup. Because otherwise, this is a bizarre choice by Ben Grew and his staff. Like, especially too, like, let's think about this. You put Alnefelt in for Game 4. He does well, but you lose. You have a decision for Game 5 that you can at least think about, but not feel cornered into. But if Alnefelt gets in Game 4 and he blows it, you go back to Lagacé. There's no question about it. If Lagacé blows it in Game 4, which he did, are you going to put Alnefelt in cold with your season on the line, or are you going to trust it to the goaltender who's now blown it twice to get it together? That's a much uglier decision for Game 5, and one where it feels like no matter what happens, you're going to be questioned whether you did the wrong thing if you lose. Whereas you play Alnefelt in Game 4, that gives you some runway and an easier choice if you have to play a Game 5. Not to mention, once again, Alnefelt was the better goaltender in the regular season, and he didn't get really any time in the postseason is just weird. But he was healthy enough to dress as the backup. Mm-hmm. The other thing too, I will say, because we kind of touched on this about JF Berube being done, Max Lagacé looked done too. Like, he could still move and make saves, but like there were a couple of times in which he had to go post to post or like get off the post in the RVH and get to the top of his crease, and he just could not. And that seemed like something that Rochester picked up on. Because of me watching on AHL TV can see it. I have to imagine the guys who are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to analyze hockey for the team pick up on that too. But I don't know if that was maybe an injury he was battling through, which again, we're getting into hypotheticals and asking more questions than we have answers to. But like, Lagacé did not look good in parts of that series with some of the way he moved, and I think he's getting up there in age. This may be maybe not the end, but closer to the end than the beginning for Max Lagacé. last thing I would say we got right was third period play was our X factor. We talked about how both teams had a lot of weirdly inconsistent play in the third period during the regular season, and that very much showed up in this series. Rochester managed to blow not one, but two goal leads in the third period, and yet still managed to win both games. Like, that's insane. And like, wow, yeah, if you're a fan of the Amerks, you're impressed with their ability to rally, while simultaneously thinking that it's not exactly the type of rally you wanted to have to need, and something to be very concerned about going forward is like, oh yeah, we blew 2 goal leads in the third period twice, but we did win. But that's not, you want to close games, not leave the door open. Like, it's very, very dangerous. Sarah, any closing thoughts here before we move on to the Central Division in this kind of quasi rapid fire recap?
Right. I mean, I'm just thinking about how swift a downfall it's been for Max Lagacé, because I covered him when he was in Chicago for a couple of seasons, and like, he was fine. Like, he wasn't spectacular. He was a guy who you could call up to the NHL and he'd be, respectable there. Nearly took that team to win the Calder Cup. And see, goaltending is weird. Goaltending is like magical, and you can be amazing one year, and then the next year you're like, who is this guy? And just interesting to see in how few years it took for him to go from guy that you're confident going into the Calder Cup finals with to this might be it.
Yeah, and this is another moment where I wonder about, like, because there's obviously basically if you're doing injury reports in the AHL, it's because like someone told you, or you happen to be a very close follower of that team. Part of me wondered if there isn't like a nagging hip or knee or some kind of injury on Max Lagacé, because he just, when it came to moving and exploding side to side, he just could not do it, and that definitely sunk some of Syracuse's chances in this series. Whereas, I mean, maybe that longer series was better for him, and it gave him a chance to feel like he could go out there and play through, something.
Yeah.
But maybe that was also bad, because it didn't look like that was maybe the case. But we'll never know. There's no inside media to ask those kind of questions, unfortunately. Because I'm here in Springfield and Sarah's in Chicago.
Got nothing.
All right, Sarah, let's move on to the Central Division, to a series that you were live at for, I think, one game?
Yeah, just one.
Still.
Yeah.
I will turn it over to you. Tell me what happened in Texas v. Rockford.
All right, so in this game, it was a reverse of what happened last season, because in this series, Texas swept the Ice Hogs in 3 games, including winning 2 on the road. In Rockford. So that made the job a lot easier for Texas, knowing they just had to go home and win one more game. In no game in this series did it ever really feel like Rockford was truly dangerous. They only had 1 lead the entire time, and that was a 2-1 lead that they got in the second period of game number 2. That lead lasted for about 13 minutes, and that was it in terms of Rockford leading the series. Texas overall outshot them 95-81 over the 3 games. And Texas really set the tone from the first game, where they had a 40-28 shot advantage. So Texas came out of the gate firing, and Rockford just was never able to catch up with them. What did we miss on this one? Well, Rockford went 2 for 11 on the power play. We had big concerns about Rockford's power play, and ultimately 18% is not half bad. This was a power play that basically did nothing in the first round. And so seeing them get a couple of goals on the man advantage was at least a positive for Rockford. We also missed on the barbershop. The barbershop reopened, just not on the power play. Riley Barber got 2 goals in game number 2, including the game winner. Neither of them were like the goals you expect to see from him, but it was good to see him get on the score sheet. He just didn't do it the way we thought that he was going to be doing it. We also missed out on the goaltending X factor. This was not exactly the goaltending duel that we thought it was going to be. Matt Murray clearly outplayed Arvid Soderblom for the Ice Hogs, although neither guy really felt like they stole the show. These were games that, like, you watch it and you're like, well, that happened. Like, neither guy had to be spectacular at any point, really, to win the game or lose the game in Rockford's case. What did we get right in this series? Well, we suggested that Texas needed to limit contributions from Rockford's top players, and they did that. In Game 3, Rockford's top 6 lined up as Sini, Reichel, Tepley. Tepley was a promotion in Game 3. He'd been on the third line in the games previously, so he replaced Joey Anderson, who was up there for Games 1 and 2. Second line, largely Grimaldi, Philp, and Gust. Over the 3 games in the series, Sini had 0 points, 3 shots on goal. Reichel had 1 goal, 10 shots. Tepley had 1 goal, which is a power play goal, 7 total shots on goal. Grimaldi, 2 assists, 10 shots on goal. So he was trying to do Rocco Grimaldi things. Philp had 1 assist with 6 shots on goal. David Gust, who had a spectacular regular season, 0 points and 8 shots on goal. And then Joey Anderson, 2 goals, 1 assist, and 5 shots. One of his goals was a power play goal. So yes, the only player who actually had somewhat of a significant contribution in that top 6 got bumped down the lineup. Rockford had 6 goals total in this series, and Joey Anderson factored in on 50% of them. And, they moved him. So in reality, Texas limited contributions from all of Rockford's lineup. But if Rockford's top 6 wasn't going to get the job done, I don't know that either of us were going to look at Rockford's lineup and expect the bottom 6 to pick up that slack. Like I said, 6 total goals over this series. 4 of them came at even strength. 2 of those 4 came from bottom 6 players. One was like DJ Budstecker. Like, really? I mean, good for him, but not who you think is going to be the difference maker in the playoffs. Lucas Reichel's only goal came with 16 seconds left in Game 3. Just a total garbage time goal. The final even strength goal, the 4th one, belonged to Joey Anderson in Game 2, which was literally one of the dumbest goals that I've ever seen scored. It was just one of those weird fluky bounce ones that kind of rolled in off of Matt Murray. So at even strength, there was very little by way of meaningful contributions from that top 6. Again, of their even strength goals, one was a garbage goal from Lucas Reichel, and one was just a fluke goal that you do it 10 more times and you're probably not going to repeat it. So Texas really did a great job of just limiting anything from Rockford, and Rockford's going home.
All right. Yeah, this series very much felt like Texas was the better team, and Texas knew they were the better team, and just kind of walked in, took care of business, left. It was very much a Stone Cold Steve Austin t-shirt from the 90s, where it was like arrive, raise hell, leave.
Pretty much.
So I mean, that was what we wanted to see out of Texas, as they are. We were kind of angling towards the showdown that we're going to get between Texas and Milwaukee, and we thought both of them would have an easy walk there. But Milwaukee did not have an easy walk there. They came from behind to win their series in 5 games. I won't lie, I felt nervous after Game 3 and seeing Manitoba have a chance to upset the team that was the Calder Cup favorite in the second round, mostly because that would have made us look real dumb, and that's not exactly how I like to go down. But I will say we did miss some things in our analysis. The one that we missed that I think stands out the biggest is that Oskari Salminen stood tall. He played 4 outstanding games, and it just wasn't enough. And that's unfortunate. He played a great series, and the team in front of him let him down. I mean, in the first 2 periods of Game 5, Milwaukee was out shooting Manitoba 25-15 and 10-7 from home plate, and he kept it 1-0. He had a .923 save percentage in the series compared to Askarov's .915. He won the goalie duel, and they still lost. That's an L for our analysis, because that's not how we said it. What did we get right? Manitoba made it ugly. I feel like they did a good job of ugling up this series at times. But when they weren't able to put a third complete game together, they got dominated in games 4 and 5 despite the scoreboard looking close. And when they made mistakes, those mistakes ended up on the scoreboard. Set aside the own goal in a 1-goal game that ended up being by 1 goal, or the series-winning goal in which 2 Moose players ran right into each other. Like, there were other perfectly good examples, like when Leon Gavanka got turned around in the neutral zone in transition, and Kiefer Sherwood gets behind him and scores what would be the game winner in Game 4. Gavanka also made a pinch at the point, and Moose forwards just kind of took their sweet time covering for him. A bounce goes Mark Jankowski's way. He's off to the races, scores the first goal of game number 5. Like, those were big mistakes that, they needed to keep a cap on and to keep this game ugly. And they let Milwaukee exploit those mistakes in their coverage to just wallpaper them. Game 2 also, we said, needed to be a statement win for the Moose. It was not, especially after getting blown out in Game 1. It ended up being a come from behind miracle win. And while I don't think the series went worse for Manitoba because of it, I'm going to take my correlation here and check the box and say we were correct. They didn't get a statement win, and they lost the series because of it. I don't know how much I fully believe that, but, take your wins where you can get them. I also will say special teams is the X factor. Also correct on our part. Milwaukee went 5 for 16 on the power play. Manitoba went 3 for 20. Manitoba had 4 power plays to Milwaukee's 0 after Jankowski made it 1-0 in Game 5. 1 power play goal there, and the series might have ended differently. If they killed Toninato's high sticking penalty or don't make an own goal 6-on-5 on a delayed penalty, we could be talking about how this series ended differently and how Manitoba, killed the king. But for right now, that's not how it played out, and special teams was won by Milwaukee, and that mattered. That tipped the balance, especially for 2 teams that had very good special teams units in the regular season. Sarah, any thoughts on Milwaukee and Manitoba before we move on?
I will watch the replay of those 2 Moose players just colliding. Like, I need all of the hilarious music to be set to it. Like, I felt so bad for them. Like, we've seen that before of game winners on just absolute horrible mistakes like that. But I mean, what a way to end your series. And I feel bad for those guys. I hope they're doing okay. But it was one of the more entertaining plays that I've seen lately.
I would also like to point out too, while we only consider the regular season for our awards ballots, Daniel Fink's calls of those Manitoba goals in overtime are absolutely amazing. They are A++. Like, that is what I want from a broadcaster that can hit the high notes. He was a finalist for Best Broadcaster last year. I want to say he finished 3rd in the final ballots, but he was definitely, like, the broadcaster is always the toughest choice because it's such a subjective award in nature. And he is on the ballot again this year. We are in the process of voting, but his call in that will not influence it. But to say, like, it's not shocking. He's been able to hit the high notes all year, but, like, he found emotion in that call that was just unbelievable. I loved it. But it's time to move on here. 2 more series left to recap before we get to the previews.
So many.
We're headed over to the Pacific Division. We're going to talk Calgary and Abbotsford here. Calgary wins the series, played with penalties called with the accuracy of Punxsutawney Phil predicting the weather. Most of the penalties called, I thought, were fine. Like, they were the penalty they should have been, but there were so many missed calls. I was half expecting AT&T to sponsor the series. And the players seemed to understand that if they wanted to clutch and grab or cross-check someone, there was a 15% chance they were going to get called for it. And they just went for it. If the AHL manager for hockey operations and player safety, Stephen Thompson, doesn't have his hands full after this series and Hartford Providence, then, well, I guess I genuinely don't know what the AHL is doing, which wouldn't be the first time. So regardless, despite not going 5 games, I think it's fair to say that Abbotsford gave Calgary all it could handle, and they had a lot of opportunity to win this series, and they just could not finish. It makes me wonder how much of this series changes if Phil DiGiuseppe was made it through waivers, or if Vasily Podkolzin got healthy, or if Sheldon Dries were able to parachute in, and how that changes this series, because Abbotsford had so many chances to close this series and just couldn't. I mean, game 1, After getting cross-checked in the back 3 times in front of the official by Jet Wu, Matthew Phillips retaliates with a crotch slash and appropriately gets a game misconduct. Like, yes, official, that was the correct call on Matthew Phillips, but if you made one of the 3 cross-checking calls on Jet Wu, that penalty doesn't happen. But regardless, the Canucks get the Wranglers' best player out of the game not even halfway through the first period and lose in overtime. Game 2, Abbotsford gets 2 shorthanded goals by Archdean Baines in the span of 55 seconds to take a 2-1 lead. Tristan Nielsen makes it 3-1 going into the third period, and the Canucks lose in overtime. Game 3, the Canucks get Dustin Wolf to look mortal. Then they get the Wranglers' PK to look mortal and score their lone power play goal of the series. They hold on to win to extend the series. Game 4, they open the scoring on a goal that probably should have been called back, but a seeing eye puck from Ilya Solovyov beat Spencer Martin after a completely correct icing call. I cannot believe how many people were like, that's not a – yes, it is. That is an icing call. Go read the rule book. It is an icing call. But, like, if you want to blame that icing call for your series, that's not how you lost the series. It's Zach Katari losing the puck in a manner that will keep him up at night through the summer. And Calgary holds on to win the series. Like, that icing call didn't make you lose the face-off, give Solyvov a clean shooting lane, or make Zach Katari lose that puck, or 100 other calls that were that were Abbotsford's own players deciding the series and just not. Like, an icing call is not why you lost, and a correct one. Like, it's one of the 5 calls in the series the officials got right. So, like, you have a lot to be angry about on both sides here. But that icing is not one of them. But I will give big credit to Abbotsford here on 2 fronts. Number 1, they pushed the regular season best team to the absolute brink. 4 one-goal games, 2 in overtime. A bounce one way or the other, and we're recapping an upset here. 2, the Abbotsford and the Abbey Center was hands down the best of the Calder Cup playoffs so far, and that deserves recognition. Who knows? Maybe sometime in the future, our award show adds an award for best playoff atmosphere. I don't know how we would do that, but, like, I'm open to the idea because I think that matters. I think having a playoff building that feels alive and crazy, where I can see the camera shaking when you score a goal because that's how raucous the place is, that's a building I want to buy a ticket to see a game in. Like, probably not paying for the flight to Abbotsford for a $25 hockey ticket. But at the same point, I would at least, like, it made me at least look at my bank account and think, could I theoretically do this? And that's a credit to Abbotsford, the fans in the area, the front office team. They did a great job here. I wish they could go on further because I always I root for atmosphere. I want to see a madhouse. Okay, let's talk about what we missed in this series. I cannot say in good faith that goaltending didn't steal the show for Abbotsford. It was Spencer Martin more than Artur Silovs, although that's because Martin played 3 of the 4 games, but he gave Abbotsford an ungodly number of chances to win games, and they just did not. The goaltending stealing the show was one of our Abbotsford wins, keys to the series. I don't know how you could do more than what the 2 of them did and not consider it stealing the show. So we will take the L there. In terms of what we got right, we said Abbotsford needed to steal a game in Calgary. Spoiler, this is going to come up again. But we talked about how they couldn't go down 0-2 and win the series and the importance of stealing that game in Calgary. They came about as close to stealing a game in Calgary as you could get without doing it, but in the end did not. That's a box check for us. Calgary won the special teams battle, albeit barely, if you want. Yeah, giving up 2 shorthanded goals in a 50-something second span, not going to do you wonders for winning the special teams battle. The Wranglers went 2 for 9 on the power play. The Canucks went 0 for 7, is what I have written down here. The only game where Abbey won the special teams battle, they won, and the Canucks power play did not look good for the majority of their time on the ice. There were quite a few people who wrote about the Abbotsford playoff experience, and the power play was consistently a please make the pain stop. There were definitely power opportunities for the Canucks where the Wranglers definitely got the better scoring chances, where shorthanded, they were creating more scoring chances than the Abbotsford power play. That's not a good look. Calgary's game time goal in 2 is a textbook don't play the diamond PK. We talked about why the diamond PK is bad and why Laval led the AHL in shorthanded goals. It was one of the worst PKs because of it earlier in the season. Because when you play the diamond, that bumper spot is unable to be covered effectively. And, oh, look, there's Dryden Hunt for the game-tying goal. Friends don't let friends use the diamond on the PK. In terms of mistakes as our X factor, I feel like that one was one we got right. Qatari's mistake cost them the series. Philip Johansson getting beat to the puck by Ben Jones cost them a big goal in game 2. Rathbone losing Jacob Peltier and the puck for like a split second in overtime cost the Canucks game 1. Sarah, we watched that play live, and you heard me. As soon as I saw that that he lost that puck, I was like, "Oh shit, they're toast."
Yeah,
it's unfortunate, but like when you are playing a team that is as well coached and and executes so well as Calgary, everything is going to hurt when you make a mistake. And those mistakes cost them the series more than anything. Even if they felt like tiny ones in the moment, you give Calgary an inch and they will take a mile. All right, Sarah, I will turn it over to you to round out our breakdowns or our recaps of the second round. Tell me about what happened in Coachella Valley versus Colorado.
So some of this might sound familiar if you followed Coachella Valley and know what happened to them in the first round against Tucson, where they played games that they probably shouldn't have needed to play. In this series, Coachella Valley won the series 3-2. They dominated game 1. It was a 6-2 win, then lost the next 2 games. Both of them were pretty tight games. Game 2 was a 3-2 final score, where Colorado scored the winning goal in the final 4 minutes of the game. Game 2 was a fun 1-0 overtime game. So you get through 60 minutes of regulation and you still got to keep going. The game-winning goal was scored 1 minute and 40 seconds into overtime by Colorado. Game 4, Coachella Valley squeaked out a win. 4-3 was the final score. The game-winning goal was a shorthanded goal with about 2 minutes, 30 seconds left. So that game very easily could have gone the other way. Game 5, it's like Coachella Valley realized, oh, hey, we need to end this today. And then dominated Colorado. 5-0 was the final score there. So a similar pattern sort of to what we saw against Tucson, where they had that game in the middle where they were like, meh. And then something very funny nearly happened in that series. So what did we miss in this series? The Avalanche sending reinforcements back after Colorado got eliminated didn't put the Eagles over the top and really didn't do anything at all for them. They got back Brad Hunt, Ben Myers, Keith Kincaid. Hunt and Myers each played 2 games. They each had 1 assist. Kincaid didn't even play. In terms of players who could be difference makers for that team, this wasn't it. And it showed. They did not get any help from Colorado once the Avalanche somewhat unexpectedly got bounced. What did we get right in this series? Well, Colorado didn't win the special teams battle. The Colorado power play went 1 for 13, but then proceeded to allow 2 shorthanded goals. So that's I'm not the math person here, but that's like a negative.
It's a negative net power play.
Yes. So that's bad. Coachella Valley, meanwhile, went 4 for 18, just allowed 1 shorthanded goal in that series. So Colorado could not have gone worse for them in terms of special teams performance. We also suggested that Joey Decord needed to be good and needed to be better than good. And overall, he was. He was the best version of himself more often than not in this series. Colorado outshot Coachella Valley overall in the series, 158-135. Game 1 was the only game where Coachella Valley significantly outshot Colorado. That was 39-27. All the other games were either dominated by Colorado or Coachella Valley only had a couple of shots difference, so not anything to be statistically significant there. That game 2 goal, the 1-0, overtime the game 2 goal, the goal against came from the point with a ton of traffic in front of the net. That was the 1-0 overtime game. You can't fault Joey Decord for that. He couldn't see it. There's like 6 guys in front of him. He stopped all 24 shots that he had faced up until then. If your team isn't going to score at all in 60 minutes, like he can't score a goal for you. That game wasn't on him at all. In game 5, shots were 33-23 in favor of Colorado, and he pitched a shutout. So, again, in this series, he stepped up when he needed to. The games where they lost, I wouldn't necessarily put it on him. Particularly that overtime game, he couldn't see it. What are you going to do? And so I think that he did enough to get them through this series, and that's what we were looking for.
Yeah, and I will say, because I know people were like, Joey Decord's been great. Don't bring up Joey Decord. This will be the last we talk about Joey Decord. He does not come up in our preview for this round. So we are anticipating him to be the guy we saw in the last round, and we're going to accept that. I still think it was worth bringing up and talking about, but he has definitely shown that he can be the clutch goaltender in the playoffs that we thought he could be, but hadn't quite shown. But I think that's enough of the recap portion of the show. We need to get into the preview portion of the show. So we're going to take a quick break here, and after the break, we will get to the previews of the round 3 matchups. If you are just here for a series recap, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. Links to our social media and more can be found at our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. I'm going to run some ads, pay some bills. We will be right back. Stay tuned. And we are back from break. Welcome back. We are going to get to the tidy business of previewing the third round here. As always, east to west, Atlantic to Pacific. Let us start in the Atlantic Division, the home of the phone booth knife fight, where the Hershey Bears are playing the Hartford Wolfpack. Game 1 is today, Thursday, May 11th, 7 p.m. at the Giant Center in Hershey. Game 2, Saturday, May 13th, 7 p.m. in Hershey. Game 3 shifts the series back to Hartford, Wednesday, May 17th, 7 p.m. Friday, Game 4, if necessary, May 19th, 7 p.m. And that one's also in Hartford. Game 5, Tuesday, May 23rd, 7 p.m. at Hershey. Another example of Syracuse and Rochester getting a favorable schedule, and then everyone else are just Gordon Ramsay dumb donkeys. But let's talk about the Hershey Bears side of things first. I will take that. Let's talk about how they got here. Their playoff journey to this point started with a first-round bye, and then they beat Charlotte in 4 games in the second round. We recapped that earlier. If you missed that and are interested, it's back there somewhere. Their season record was 44-28. That was good for 4th in the AHL. Their net power play in the regular season, 15.4%, 21st in the AHL. In the playoffs, it's done a little better, 20%. That's 9 of the 23 playoff teams. Their penalty kill in the regular season, 83.1%. That was 18th in the AHL in net penalty kill. In the playoffs, 90%. That's 8th of 23 playoff teams. So it's getting a little better on the special teams aspect for Hershey, but at least from a percentage point. If Hershey wins this series, it's because they made plays and battled through contact. The reason we refer to this side of the playoffs as the phone booth knife fight is because every team that made the playoffs in the Atlantic is good and capable of winning this division and more. And all of them have the ability to grind an opponent down physically. They could lay hits, battle along the walls, win a puck in the D zone, fly through the neutral zone. The Atlantic playoffs also have a bunch of teams that definitely don't like each other or would very quickly learn that they do not like each other. The Atlantic Division playoff series were never going to be elegant sword fights where each side stopped for tea between rounds. The Atlantic Division was going to be knife fights in a phone booth where, win or lose, you were going to take some cuts from the other side. The Bears in this series, win or lose, are going to take cuts here. They're going to get hit. They're going to have to battle for nearly every puck. And while the series against Charlotte gave them a taste for that, this series is going to dial that up to 11. I know a few Bears fans who either watched or kept tabs on the later stages of that Hartford-Providence series and saw the level of battle that Hartford brings. They took it to Providence in a very physical way, sometimes over the line. But guys like Annis, Scarbosa, Pilon, Vecchione, McMichael, Snively, etc., they're going to have to make plays and battle through the physicality that the Wolfpack bring. That means winning battles at the net front and along the wall and making plays through contact. This is the phone booth knife fight. To win, you're going to have to take some cuts and keep going. If the Bears can make plays through contact, they will win this series. If the Bears win this series, it's going to be because they made Dylan Garand and or Louis Dominguez's life miserable. So far, we've only seen Dylan Garand, who's played very well, but Springfield barely quizzed him, and Providence took two full games before they really gave him any sort of test. Garand has looked good so far, but his workload has been comparatively the easiest of any playoff team left. Even in Providence's lone win in the series, 2 of the goals were very fluky. But what kind of battle and poise Garand has still feels largely unknown. Hartford has done an excellent job of protecting him and keeping high danger opportunities down, clearing rebounds and making his workload as easy as possible. And that's why you've heard some murmurs after Game 4 that maybe it was the Spicy Pork King's time in net. But Garand has stood tall so far, but there is a chance we could see Domingue play in this series. Regardless of goaltender, Hershey will not live to see the conference finals if Hartford continues to give their goalies light workloads. And that means more than Hershey just blindly throwing someone at the net front to screen. This isn't 1990 anymore. That tactical plan isn't good enough in the year of our Lord, 2023. A good net front presence and point shot slappers aren't a good enough offensive strategy to win most JV high school playoffs, let alone the second best league in the world. Hershey needs puck movement across Royal Road. They need rush chances, layered screens, passes from behind the net to the high slot for shot attempts. They need shots that use the defenseman as a screen to hide the release. If Hershey goes down in this series, it's because if Hershey goes down in the series, they need to make sure it's because they left no stone unturned in the testing of Hartford's goaltenders. Sarah, that is the Hershey side of what they need to do to win. How did Hartford get here? What do they have to do?
So Hartford's playoff journey to this point, they had the very unexpected sweep of Springfield in round 1. Their regular season record was 35-37, 13th in the AHL. Their net power play was 13.5% in the regular season, which was 27th in the league. In the playoffs, 12.5%, giving them 15th out of 23 playoff teams. Their net penalty kill was 82.1% in the regular season, 21st in the AHL. In the playoffs, they're clicking at 90% right now. That is 8th out of the 23 playoff teams. If Hartford wins this series, it's because they have been the more physical team. So Hartford, you did a great job being the more physical team against Providence. You did, in fact, do too good of a job being the most physical team against Providence. So you have to dial it back a little bit from like the murder setting to the one just below involuntary manslaughter. Just chill it down a little bit. Taking penalties in this series is unlikely to be a problem. Hershey's power play, it's a lot like Hartford's. It's static, it's boring, and it is so predictable that even Jim Cramer can see it coming. That is an economics joke, by the way. You can Google it. I'm sorry if you don't watch a lot of like MSNBC. I don't know what to tell you. So the 2-minute penalty that you're going to take for a roughing call, that's not the problem. It is the 5-minute major penalty plus possible suspensions that you can't afford. Like, I don't know, Adam Clendenning trying to see if his shoulder can be registered as a guillotine. Him missing time is going to hurt Hartford in this series. The Will Lockwood hit, that one was unfortunate, but felt more like bad timing and circumstances and not necessarily worthy of a 5-minute major and a game misconduct. But when they stretcher the other guy off, it is kind of hard to just call that a 2-minute penalty and be done with it. Regardless, Hartford has to be the more physical team, and taking regular 2-minute penalties isn't going to be a huge deal. Again, this is the phone booth knife fight. You're going to take some cuts and give some cuts, but you can't be losing players to game misconducts and supplemental discipline. You need all the soldiers that you can cram into that phone booth. So be physical, lay the body, take a penalty or two. Now, like, we're not saying play dirty, take liberties. Like, no, that is not the point of this. But being the more physical team often leads to taking more penalties. It is just a cost of doing business in a way. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's a human element to this as well. refs see a team make a big legal hit after a big legal hit, and suddenly they want to apply a little more scrutiny to the play when it comes to stuff like hooks and trips and roughing calls. Not saying that definitely happens, but seeing some of the officiating to this point in the playoffs, you can draw your own conclusions. But overall, again, Hartford needs to dial it back from ending up as a submitted clip in the league's player safety office inbox. Occasionally, I have been led to believe they do sometimes check their email. We'll see. Also, if Hartford wins this series, it's going to be because Will Cooley got off the side of a milk carton and onto the score sheet. If you were to tell me at the beginning of the series, at the beginning of the playoffs, that Will Cooley, power forward, thrives in the phone booth knife fight type environment, like this is his jam. If you would tell me he had 1 assist in the playoffs for the Wolfpack, I would just assume they didn't make it past round 2, if even that far. He led the team in goals. He was second in points, led the team in shots on goal, all while reining in his notoriously bad temper. He has scored 0 goals and is 9th on the team in shots on goal in the playoffs. He could have been in the press box in games 2 and 3 against Providence and had the same impact that he had being on the ice. Hershey has first-round picks. They have guys who played 58 games, scoring 15 points in the NHL this season on the third line. There is no way that Hartford wins this series with its leading scorer in the regular season just hitting the snooze button again. So Will Cooley needs to wake up, and he needs to make a big impact on this series, or Hershey is going to be moving on and Hartford is heading home.
All right, last but not least is the X factor for this series. The piece of the series, one way or the other, that will lay its thumb on the scale and tip it for one side or the other. And that was, I mean, we kind of thought about trying to work this into the keys somehow, but it ended up kind of sticking at its own thing. But it is clearly the most important aspect of the series, and that's Hershey's breakout versus Hartford's forecheck. The story of Hartford's playoff run here can be summed pretty easily. They forecheck hard. A majority of their goals this postseason have come off of plays that began with a dump-in that forechecked into a turnover and possession. That the forecheck they run isn't anything innovative or special. It's an in-your-face, full-court press 1-2-2. It's not that dissimilar from the forecheck the Carolina Hurricanes have been running for 2+ seasons in the NHL. They dump the puck in, the first forward, F1, gets up your ass like a thong and forces the defenseman to make a quick decision under pressure. F2 and F3 take away those quick pressure release valves like up the boards or short passes to a forward swinging through the center. Or they force those players to make glass and out plays into the neutral zone. Hartford's D recover the puck, dump it in again, and F1 circles back and goes to asking you G-string or V-back. Springfield had no answer for it. Providence had little answer for it. If Hershey can find an answer for it, the scales of this series tip massively in their favor. If they don't, and Hartford is able to bang bodies and get turnovers deep in the offensive zone, then Hershey is going to be another Goliath head on Hartford's trophy mantle as they go to the Calder Cup finals past whatever North Division sacrificial lamb wins that series. This is what is going to determine the series point break. Hershey's breakout versus Hartford's forecheck. That's the story of this series. Book it. All right, Sarah. Time to get down to brass tacks here. Who are you taking to win the series?
All right, so I have been picking against Hartford basically the whole time here, and I have been wrong every time. I am tired of being wrong. This team went into the playoffs on a roll, and they made winning that series against Providence look easy. I don't know also that many people anticipated the Rangers getting eliminated when they did, and I really like the additions that Hartford has made off of the Rangers roster to help them out here. I don't think this series is going to be as easy of an out for Hartford as their previous series against Providence was, but ultimately I do think they advance. I am finally getting on board with the Hartford Wolfpack, and they're my pick in this series.
I'm incredibly torn here. Hershey is very deep, but they're also banged up. Is Ethan Frank healthy? Ron Nests? Bobby Nardella? Despite a great roster and solid coaching, Hershey looked very mortal at times at Charlotte and seemed like at some points they were unable to get out of their own way and beat a team that they were better talent-wise than. Hartford's played maybe 3 bad periods in their last 15 games combined, but they're also without Adam Clendenning for game 1 and 2. I've said it multiple times across the show. I think this series is the default Eastern Conference final. So really, this series is for a trip to the Calder Cup finals here in my mind. I think it comes down to knowing Clendenning is coming back and not knowing if Frank, Ness, or Nardella are, with a lot of hesitation here by the skin of their teeth and full of stab wounds. I'm going to Hartford for the phone booth knife fight winner. I cannot believe I'm saying that. Hershey is very good. This is going to be a very good series. But I think by the skin of their teeth, Hartford feels like a team that is just clicking at the right time. And while Hershey is good, they definitely felt like at times they were going through the motions against Charlotte, and that's just not going to get it done here. The model is on our side too, which I was very surprised by. Hartford is a 54.4% favorite in the series. Congratulations, Hershey. All three of us are on the same side. That's what you wanted. We are creating bulletin board material for you here. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing how this plays out. I think it's going to be a very entertaining series, if nothing else. But it's time to move on. Let us go to the North Division and talk about the Marlies and Americans. Game 1, Thursday, May 11th, 7 p.m. in the Coca-Cola Arena Center in Toronto. Game 2, Saturday, May 13th, 4 p.m. starts at Toronto. Game 3, the series shifts over to the Amerks, May 17th, 7:05 p.m. Game 4 is Friday, May 19th, 7:05 p.m., both in Rochester. Game 5, the series goes back to Canada, Sunday, May 21st, 4 p.m. So 2 matinee weekend games for the Toronto Marlies here. Don't know if I feel good about that one. But let's talk about the Marlies first. They are the higher seed here. They got here from a first-round bye. Then they beat Utica in 4 games in the second round. Their regular season record was 40-32. That was 6th in the AHL. Their net power play rank in the regular season, 21.9%. That was 2nd in the entire AHL. In the playoffs, 25%. That is 5th out of 23 playoff teams. To be fair to them, though, a couple of them played 2 games and scored like 1 power play goal on 2 opportunities. So is that a fair 5th out of 23? Probably not, but I don't know what to do. Penalty kill in the regular season, 84.6%, 11th in the AHL. In the playoffs, 93.3%, 4th of 23 playoff teams. So their special teams have been clicking. If the Marlies want to win, though, Erik Källgren continues to do what he did in the previous round. We talked about him at the top of the show. He's not what we expected or who we expected in net for the Marlies, but he stepped up in a massive way in the previous series. Given whatever is going on with the Maple Leafs goaltending situation, it feels doubtful that Joseph Woll is coming back quite in time for the beginning of this series. Who knows if the Maple Leafs decide to pull the reverse sweep? That seems super unlikely, but, it's a weird playoffs are weird. Regardless, Källgren showed that he can elevate his play at this level, and assuming the Marlies aren't going to try and get cute and go back to Petruzzelli, this is Källgren's net now, but he still has to earn that trust. Yes, he stepped up in a massive way, but I don't think Greg Moore suddenly forgets a very mediocre regular season because of a few big playoff games. If Källgren can continue to give the Marlies legitimate goaltending, they will win this series. If the Marlies win the series, it's because the entire team continues to step up and contribute. As we mentioned in the recap of the Utica series, the Marlies got contributions from the entire lineup. Carl Dahlstrom scored his first goal since 2021. Yeah, if that doesn't tell you how much everyone in the Marlies stepped up and came to play, I don't know what does. But Rochester advanced in basically the same way. Tyson Kozak scored 2 goals in the series against Syracuse. He had 5 in 55 games in the regular season this year. Rochester has a deeper roster than you'd initially expect if you just kind of glance at the names. But those guys have shown up this season, and they can score. If Toronto wants to advance to the conference finals, this is going to need to be another all-hands-on-deck situation where they continue to be able to threaten to score with every line that comes over the boards. They're still going to need everyone to pull their weight to keep this ship afloat. Otherwise, Rochester's moving on. If the Marlies win the series, it's because they continue to play with solid defensive structure. When the Marlies looked capable and were stifling the Comets, it's because they didn't panic. They stuck to their assignments and roles in the defensive zone. And that sounds like such an obvious and simple thing, but it's not as easy as you'd think. Because in game number 2, the Marlies' defense was as dialed in and sharp as the NHL broadcasting the draft lottery results. And a lot of that was getting caught scrambling or puck watching. This is the AHL. It's still the second best league in the world. And if you aren't where you need to be and constantly scanning over your shoulder, keeping track of where all 5 or 6 opponents are in your zone, goals are going to get scored against you because it only takes a second for an opponent to shift into an open passing lane behind you and the puck is in the back of the net, and you're going to have to see that clip in meetings for the next 2 straight days. That definitely happened after the Marlies game 2, where Utica just caught them watching the puck. But when Toronto stuck to its assignments, looked over its shoulder, picked up trailers, picked up off-puck assignments, they stayed in that defensive structure, they succeeded. They shut down the Comets. If they continue to do that, they will win this series. Sarah, Rochester is the other side of this. Tell me how they got here. What do they need to do?
So Rochester, so far, they had a bye in the first round and then beat Syracuse in 5 games in the second round. If you missed us talking about that, rewind to somewhere in the beginning where we talked about that series. The season record was 36-36 in the regular season, 15th in the AHL. Their net power play was 17.2%, good for 13th in the regular season, 27.8% so far in the playoffs, which is 4th out of our 23 playoff teams. The net penalty kill was 84.4% in the regular season, or 12th in the league. And in the playoffs, they're at 81.3%, 15th out of 23 playoff teams. So if Rochester wins this series, it's going to be because they either won the boat race or they just didn't play boat race hockey. Both teams in this series love to create chances in transition. They want to get going north-south, fly through the neutral zone, attack on the rush, and they will very much live by the sword and die by the sword with how they play the game. But because Toronto is excellent at playing that way and is, in fact, what they'd likely prefer, then Rochester either needs to win that style of play or commit to not playing it. And that can be a pretty thin line that they walk as a team. If you're the third forward coming in on a rush chance, or you're a defenseman looking to jump up into the play, it's going to be hard to not get caught up in the play for a second and try to be an option where in the slot where you can one-time a puck home. And that's all it takes, just a second getting caught deep, and the other team gets a bounce and they're off to the races the other way on a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1. And Rochester can afford that if they're the ones winning these exchanges, and if not, then it needs to be time to be responsible and play a little more boring. Also, if Rochester wins this series, it's going to be because Blue Cross Arena continues to be hostile. Again, maybe we need to consider that playoff atmosphere award because Rochester has been getting it done. Despite getting just 2 of the home games in the last series, Rochester brought it in terms of attendance, fan engagement. Game 3 of the series had a listed attendance of 9,101 on a Friday night in Rochester. Game 4 was a Sunday matinee, slightly fewer, 7,200 and some people. So yeah, the drawn-out nature of that series certainly gave Rochester more time to mobilize fans, sell tickets, drum up interest, which is great. But now they need to capitalize on that and build on that for the next round, especially considering that Toronto's not far away. Toronto's just a 3-hour drive from Rochester. And are there dedicated enough Marlies fans who are going to want to cross the border and make that drive? Honestly, probably. It's Toronto. Rochester needs to make sure that there is not some kind of Marlies takeover in this series. That is their house. They fended off Syracuse in it, and they need to keep that momentum going for this round. And then finally, if Rochester wins this series, it's going to be because Michael Mersch continued to lead by example. Now, he's not the most skilled player on the team. I don't think in his 3 seasons in Rochester he's ever been the most talented guy, but he is a player who is built for the playoffs. As fast and talented and rush chance happy as Rochester can be, Mersch is a battler. And you need guys like that in the playoffs more than ever. Time and space get smaller, puck battles get meaner and more frequent, and that is what he is built for. He is 100% the heartbeat of this team, even when he's not scoring. When he is scoring, though, it also feels like he can put the team on his back and carry it through sheer willpower. I don't know that the Marlies necessarily have a comparable player in their dressing room, which makes Mersch all the more important for Rochester. He is the emotional leader of this team, and that is why he is their captain. But when he's scoring, he doesn't need to say anything. The team just follows his lead. And if he can keep leading on the score sheet, then he is going to help lead this team into the next round.
All right. Last but not least, we have the X factor in this series. The one thing that will, tip the balance of the series one way or the other, and that is discipline. Both teams have superb power plays. Toronto showed they can win a playoff game without scoring on the power play. Rochester really hasn't yet. Rochester's PK was middling in the regular season and let them down big in moments in the playoffs. Toronto's looked good against Utica, but it's hard to tell at times if that was their PK succeeding or Utica's power play just flailing around like a Magikarp like it did for most of the season. Toronto hasn't done a good job of staying out of the box. They were 25th in penalty differential in the regular season. They're 19th of 23 teams in playoff differential. And yes, some of that is the badly and bizarrely officiated series against Utica. But can you really say that won't continue in this round? I can't. So discipline is going to be important because power plays are going to be important, as both teams have penalty kills we're not too sure about and power plays we are very sure about. So if one team gets a decided advantage in penalty differential here, that will tip the balance. So discipline is our X factor. Sarah, we are once again down to brass tacks here. We're going to make some picks. I will go first. This is another hard one. I think Rochester has the better team, but Toronto has been one of the most resilient teams in the AHL this season. As much as I like Seth Appertz, I'm not entirely sure he's the best coach in this series. Both goaltenders have played well, but in small samples, and it's hard to really feel confident about one or the other. The Marlies can also get reinforcements from the Maple Leafs when Florida knocks them out. Joseph Woll changes the equation here, as does potentially Matthew Nyes. I struggle to overlook that, parachuting in from a team that's down 3-1 in a playoff series. And I think that tips it for me. I'm going to go Toronto here, but it's razor thin. Like, if you tell me that Eric Shalgren has 2 paper cuts, I might switch and take Rochester. But Sarah, what say you?
Yeah, my gut instinct on this one also says the Marlies here. I admit to not being super impressed with them in the regular season this year, despite the fact that they were by and large the best team in their division in the regular season. I fully thought their goaltending or lack thereof was going to sink them, but so far I've been wrong. I'm going to go for the most chaotic answer here, and that is going with Toronto on this series.
Here's the most interesting part. The model has Rochester is a 60.6% favorite. Like, that's not a massive favorite. It's, 39.4% chances happen all the time. Like, if the forecast said there's a 40% chance of rain, are you leaving the house without an umbrella? Exactly. But like, that's one of the bigger favorites in this round, and one that I'm surprised by. But I double checked. It is calculating the Toronto-Rochester series as it does all the rest. So that is how the model puts it. We are on Toronto's side. The model is very much on the other. But we are going to take a break here. After the break, we will get to the Western Conference previews. If you're just here for Eastern Conference side of things, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. This preview comes out the day of most game ones. So if you catch it when game 4 is happening, it's not really doing you much good. Also, check us out on social media. Links to our social media and more, like where you can find this cool sweatshirt, can be found at our Linktree page at linktr.ee/the Calder Farmstead. We're going to pay some bills, run some ads. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. And we are back from break. We are getting right into it. It is late here, and I am tired and cranky. But that doesn't stop me from doing my best to talk about the Western Conference Playoff Series. But I will let Sarah start us off. Tell me about Texas and Milwaukee.
All right, so we're headed to Milwaukee to start this series. Game 1 is Friday, May 12th at 7 p.m. In Milwaukee. Game number 2 is the next night, Saturday, May 13th at 6 p.m. And then the series switches to Texas for the final 3 games. Wednesday, May 17th, 7 p.m. is game number 3. Game 4 is Friday, May 19th, also at 7 p.m. And game 5, Sunday, May 21st, 7 p.m., all 3 of those games at Texas. So we're going to look at the Texas Stars first and how they got here. They had a first round bye and then swept Rockford in the second round of the playoffs. In the regular season, they were 40-32, which is 5th in the AHL. The net power play was 15.2%, 23rd in the AHL in the regular season. In the playoffs, they are at 20%, 9th out of our 23 playoff teams. The net penalty kill was 88.8%, second in the AHL in the regular season. In the playoffs, something happened. 81.8%, 14th out of 23 playoff teams in the league this season. If Texas wins this series, it's because they didn't take bad penalties. If you have to haul a guy down to prevent a scoring chance or something of that nature, do what you got to do. Otherwise, Texas needs to have the discipline of an Abbott when it comes to taking penalties. Milwaukee is clicking at a 31.3% net power play in the playoffs, and that is not just good puck luck. This team is terrifying on the man advantage with the talent that they can throw out there on the ice. And we've said it all year when we've broken down PK structure. But the best way to not allow any power play goals is to not take penalties. It seems simple, but that doesn't make it any less true. They defend the neutral zone and they force the Admirals to play dump and chase. If they do that, they're going to win this series. I thought the Stars did a good job overall of keeping the Ice Hogs from whipping through the neutral zone at will. That paid off, but Milwaukee is a different animal. Stat from a friend of the show, Eric Dunet, over at Preds Prospects. Of Milwaukee's 10 5-on-5 goals, 7 of those came within 10 seconds of a turnover, and 8 came within 10 seconds of a zone entry. So the Admirals have more NHL talent on their roster than Texas does. They have speed up and down their lineup. If the Stars let the Admirals get through the neutral zone with speed, they can start booking their summer vacations and their tea times now because the Admirals will make them pay for it. Also, if Texas wins, it's going to be because they continue to get production from up and down the lineup. It's hard to really say what the fourth line is for Texas. According to the depth chart, it's Tufte, Gardner, Camano. That line combined for 4 of Texas's 13 goals. The third line of McKenzie, Back, and Studenich has 3 goals. The second line of Blumel, Caro, Barber has 3 goals. The first line of Damiani or Stranges, Bork, and Reedy has 2 goals. So that made Texas pretty challenging to defend as they could roll 4 lines that could score at will against Rockford. But Milwaukee, however, they are a deep and talented team. It's going to be an all-hands-on-deck situation in Texas if they want to pull out of this series and win the Central. So if they do win, it's going to be because their depth came through. They won shifts. They got on the score sheet against Milwaukee's depth lines, which are also tough to categorize as all 4 of them have scoring talent on them as well. So, Sean, what is the flip side of this coin here with the Milwaukee Admirals?
So their playoff journey to this point, first round bye, they just hand them out in the Central Division. You just kind of show up for it. Then they beat Manitoba in 5 games in the second round, which we recapped like 25, 35, 45 minutes ago. Who even knows what is time? Their season record was 37-35. That was 8th in the AHL. Their net power play and rank 21.5% in the regular season. That was good for 4th in the playoffs. 31.3%, 3rd of 23 AHL playoff teams. Their net penalty kill in the regular season, 84.7%. That's good for 10th in the AHL. In the playoffs, 85%. It's good for 11th out of 23 playoff teams. If the Admirals win this series, it's because they limited shenanigans. They were the most heavily penalized Central Division team in the playoffs with 70 penalty minutes. Their PK has been consistently decent in both the regular season and the playoffs. Past versions of the Admirals, though, have descended into goonery at times. This year's team is too talented and needed to need to stoop to that. But if they let Texas get under their skin, which, is possible, they may find things spiraling out of control quickly. If Milwaukee wins this series, it's because the Tomasino-Angelo Schneider line gets going. It's baffling that I'm going to say this, but a guy who's a first-round draft pick and scored 18 points in 31 NHL games this season is on a line with a guy who scored 25 goals in the AHL this season, and they haven't gotten anything done in the postseason so far. They're creating chances, and that's good, but those chances aren't going in. And yeah, 5 games is a tiny sample size. But I think back to the line from Elliot Friedman about the playoffs a few years back. In the playoffs, no one cares how many scoring chances you create. You're here to score goals. The scoring chances they've created are nice, but the Admirals cannot set sail to the conference finals if those chances don't end up in the back of the net. Texas, as we just talked about, can roll 4 lines that can score. And if one of the Admirals' most talented lines isn't getting it done, Texas is going to win this series. Lastly, if the Milwaukee Admirals win this series, it's because Yaroslav Askarov stayed inside the lines. I love me some Askarov. He's clearly the goalie of the future in the Preds organization, and the hype train behind him feels very justified, but he has 2 bad attributes. Number 1 is that mustache. Number 2 is his desire to occasionally go way off script in nets. Occasionally, that's a necessary move when things break down in front of him, and he needs to break from structure and technical goaltending and just make a bleeping save. I'll never forget the answer that Kat Silverman gave when asked, what keeps good AHL goaltenders from becoming good NHL goaltenders? And she said it was exactly that. The ability to break from technical form and just make a save in chaos when everything is breaking down in front of you. Askarov, in my opinion, has that ability, but he very much likes to play that card too often and has gotten burned by it a few times where he gets out over his proverbial skis. And every single Admirals fan and the entire coaching staff just clutches their hands and holds their breath and says, please don't do this to me. I'm not going to live to see 60. Askarov needs that part to stay in his game, but he needs to get better at identifying when it's time to throw it out and make a save. Hint, it's not on a breakaway in a tie game in the first period. Yes, I realize that's a monumental ask here for Askarov to basically make a developmental leap in a week, but Texas is a buzzsaw team, and you absolutely cannot hand them free goals and expect good results here. And last but not least is our X factor for this series, one part of the series in one form or the other that can put its thumb on the scale and tip the balance in favor of one team or the other, and that is the Seattle Kraken. This is twice now that the Kraken have their ability to put their thumb on the scale of an AHL playoff series. It weirdly worked out for them last time, but it's a bit different here. The Dallas-Seattle game number 7, if necessary, is Monday, May 15th in Dallas. And if Dallas loses that series or game 7 or however you want to talk, if Dallas does not win that series, that's plenty of time to parachute in Thomas Nightrod Harley and Frederick Olofsson into Texas for game 3 on the 17th. That's 2 whole days for them to get to Cedar Park from Dallas and have a practice under their belts, get reacquainted with the team. That's a big game changer for this series, no matter what the series is at. If Milwaukee's up 2-0, but Texas just gets gifted 2 NHL caliber players, that matters. That's going to shift, maybe not the balance of the series, but greatly impact how it's played going forward. So Nashville and Milwaukee fans, you just became Dallas Stars fans too. Welcome to the Calder Cup Playoffs, where your fandom can get weird real fast. That is why the Seattle Kraken are our X factor, again, in a different AHL series. All right, Sarah, it's time for picks. Who are you taking?
So I think this is going to be a fun, close series, but I am going to go with Texas on this one. I don't know that I would have made that pick before really honing in on following that Texas Rockford series and seeing how they played. Seeing how they did the absolute most to limit any chances that Rockford had. Texas is a very focused team. They've got a strong mix of veterans, younger talent. And so I'm awarding my pick to Texas. And I will admit that it is partly based on the very fussy analytic category of intangibles. But I have just liked what I've seen from the Texas Stars. And I don't think this is going to be an easy series at all. But I think it will be very fun to watch as someone who has no skin in this game whatsoever.
This is a tough one for me. I think Milwaukee is the better team, but the 2-3 format in Texas actually having an atmosphere worthy of playoffs matters. Milwaukee's power play is great, but I trust Matt Murray more right now. I'm torn. I think in the end here, I'm going to take Milwaukee. I think Carl Taylor is the better coach, and while Texas is hot, I trust the talent in Milwaukee just a tiny, tiny pinch more. I think this is a series of 1-goal games, probably some overtime mixed in, so buckle up. But I think this is going to be one of the most closely contested playoff series we have this year. The model also recognizes the closeness of it, that on the graph, there aren't enough decimal points to show an actual favorite. So I had to pull up the actual output. Texas is a 50.01% favorite according to the model. That is as close to a true coin flip as you can get. I got nothing to elaborate on that. 50.01. But I've been running the model to predict games for 2.5 seasons now. This is, I think, the smallest margin any team has ever shown in a playoff series. I don't know if I've ever even seen a game that was 50.01. They're usually, if they're 50-50, or a little higher. But yeah, we're in for a ride here. But let's move on and talk about the last series on our docket. The 1v2 in the league, Calgary v. Coachella, the Wranglers against the Firebirds. Game 1 is today, Thursday, May 11th, 7:05 p.m. in Calgary. Game 2, Friday, May 12th, a back-to-back, 7:05 p.m. in Calgary. Game 3, the series shifts over to Coachella Valley, Monday, May 15th, 7 p.m. Game 4, Wednesday, May 17th, 7 p.m. at Coachella Valley. And Game 5, Friday, May 19th, 7 p.m. at Coachella Valley. Yes, Calgary, once again, surrendering home ice, and we will talk about that later. But for right now, yep, I know. We're going to get there. Don't worry. But right now, let's stick to the format we have and how they got here. The Calgary Wranglers playoff journey is a first-round bye, and they beat Abbotsford in 4 games in the second round. Their season record was 51-21. That was the best in the AHL. Their net power play in the regular season, 18.9%, 8th in the AHL. In the playoffs, 5.6% net power play, 18th of 23 playoff teams. It is amazing that there are, 3 worse teams than 5.6 net power play, but Tucson exists. Net penalty kill, 89.2% in the regular season. That was second best in the AHL. In the playoffs, 94.4%, third of 23 playoff teams. If the Calgary Wranglers win, it's because Dustin Wolf continues to be Dustin Wolf. Wolf's numbers have been just good in the playoffs, and just good was enough to get them past Abbotsford. But just good isn't going to be enough to get them past Coachella Valley. Thankfully, the 2-time Bastion Award winner, league MVP, and finalist for the Calder Farmstead's Best Goaltender Award in 21-22 was able to get away with being just good. I very much would not count on that happening again. From both fronts, Dustin Wolf has been named the best goaltender for whatever league he's played in 4 consecutive years. You do not get that consistently awesome by just suddenly becoming just good for long stretches. However, Dustin Wolf can't start a descent into just good right now. He needs to be the Team Wolf that we all know and Mitch love. The one that makes leaps into the air in pregame like a ninja and then makes sprawling saves late in the game when his team does a no-no. That's going to be what keeps Coachella Valley, on the golf course, which in Coachella Valley, they are very nice. But that is how Calgary advances to the next round, is Dustin Wolf getting back to the business of being Dustin Wolf. If Calgary wins, it's because they score first and win the first period. When Coachella Valley gets rolling early, look out. They got 2 quick ones in the middle of the first period in Game 1 against Colorado. They rolled that into a 6-2 win. 2 quick first period goals to start the first in Game 4. They held on to win 4-3. 2 goals 48 seconds apart early in the first period in Game 5 against Colorado. They trucked that to 5-0. In round 1, both Firebirds wins were ones that felt over at the first intermission. I remember watching Game 1 and it was 3-0. I'm like, well, I can go do other stuff now. This is over. Game 3, same thing. 4-0 going into the first intermission. I'm like, oh, this game's over. Bye. Maybe there's something on Netflix that looks fun for the next 2 periods because I don't need to watch this. Both times Coachella Valley went on to win 5-1. Coachella Valley is 5-0 leading after one period in the playoffs. They're 4-0 when scoring first. Calgary cannot afford to start slow and let the Firebirds dominate the opening minutes and expect to have good results. If Calgary wins this series, it's because they get more from key forwards. Walker Dewar, Mitch McLean, and Connor Zary combined for 59 primary points 5-on-5 in the regular season. Through 4 playoff games, they've combined for 1. Speaks to the depth and grit of this team where that can happen and they can still close the series in 4 games. But that level of performance against the second best team in the AHL in the regular season will not be good enough, especially from McLean and Dewar, who are big physical forwards that are built for playoff hockey. Coachella Valley is deep and has depth that does more than throw hits and kill penalties. Their depth scores. And that was the calling card of Calgary as well, that they could come at you in waves with forechecking pressure, physicality, force turnovers, score goals. That last part doesn't manifest in this round. The next round, Zary, Dewar, and Moose will be playing will be on the golf course in Coachella Valley. That's what Calgary needs to do. Sarah, take me on the other side. How did Coachella Valley get here? What do they need to do?
So Coachella Valley got here by beating Tucson in 3 games in the first round, and then they beat Colorado in 5 games in the second round. Their season record in the regular season, 48-24, second in the AHL. Net power play was 17.8%, or 12th in the AHL in the regular season. In the playoffs, they are 21.2%, 7th out of 23. The net penalty kill is 86.2% in the regular season, for 6th in the league. And in the playoffs, it is 95.5%, good for 5th out of 23 teams. So if Coachella Valley wins this series, it is going to be because their depth scoring is continuing to be a factor. Some of their top players are still up with the Kraken, who are hanging around in the NHL playoffs. That series is tied at 2 each right now as we're recording this. The earliest we're going to know an outcome would be May 13th, which is Game 6. It could obviously go to 7 games, which is going to take even longer. By that time, we're already going to be 2 games deep into this series. Coachella Valley has been getting solid performances from players who weren't necessarily prolific scorers in the regular season. Riker Evans has 9 points in 8 games. In the regular season, he had 44 in 71. Alexander True, 8 points in 8 games, 32 in 72 in the regular season. Jeremy McKenna, 7 points in 8 games, 12 in 27 in the regular season. Eddie Wichow has 2 goals in the playoffs in the same game. He had 4 total in the regular season. So, good for him. In the regular season, guys like Max McCormick and Cole Lind were great. They continue to lead this team now through the playoffs, but there's been some shakeups in terms of the scoring underneath them. Coachella Valley is going to continue to need guys like Evans and True to score, especially if the Kraken continue in the playoffs and they continue to not have guys like Ty Cartier or Jesper Froden. They're going to need these guys to step up. If they win, it's going to be because they found a way to stop Matthew Phillips and Jacob Pelletier. Abbotsford threw everything at those 2 guys. They were insanely physical to the point of missed calls when it came to finishing checks, battling along the boards. They seemingly always had a defender following them around, and they still combined for 7 points in 4 games. When the spotlight shined the brightest, the 2 of them were there. Pelletier scored the game winner in Game 1. Phillips scores the game winner in Game 2. Phillips has the primary assist on the game winner in Game 4. Pelletier has the primary assist on the insurance goal in Game 4, and the secondary assist on Phillips's game winner in Game 2. These guys battle through contact and physicality like water off a duck. If you try to double team them, then they're going to find the open player and make you pay for, ignoring the rest of the ice. I don't know that there's an answer for how to stop them. We don't have it. But Disco Dan, Stu Bickle, and Jessica Campbell sure do. Otherwise, Calgary is going to move on. Also, if Coachella Valley wins this series, it's going to be because they won the special teams battle. To this point, Coachella Valley special teams have been good. More important, they've been timely. Max McCormick's shorthanded goal in Game 5, just 46 seconds after McKenna made it 1-0, felt like a backbreaker in that game. Cole Lynn's power play goal in Game 4 retook the lead for the team. Alexander True's shorty also retook the lead in that game as well. Calgary's power play has been good too, but those two shorthanded goals that Archie Baines scored just take them down in terms of the math there. More so than just not allowing Calgary to score power play goals, Coachella Valley also needs to continue to wield that deadly power play that makes the Wranglers pay for their egregious physicality, and that is not going to be easy. Calgary's penalty kill, like every other aspect of their team, is stupid good. It was good in the regular season. It was good against Abbotsford. It was good when they were Stockton last season. It is basically the green eggs and ham of penalty kills. And Colorado's penalty kill was decent. Tucson's was hot garbage. So this is going to be the biggest test of Coachella Valley's power play efficiency so far in the postseason. And it is a test that they're going to need to have answers for, because if they're not clicking on special teams, then Calgary is going to move on in this one.
And our X factor for the series, and I promised we would get here, is winning on the road. Calgary, for whatever idiotic reason, took games 1 and 2 and let Coachella Valley have the remaining 3 games. And I cannot emphasize this enough. This was Calgary's choice, according to the AHL schedule release, and it makes no sense. The travel costs are the same. Actually, they're worse in what Calgary did. If Calgary did the 2-2-1 schedule, they'd play the first 2 in Calgary, fly to Coachella Valley, play 2 games over 3 days, and fly back. Playing the 2-3 schedule, they're going to play 2 games in Calgary, fly to Coachella Valley, play 3 games over 5 days, a longer stay requiring a bigger hotel bill, and then at the end of the series, they're going to fly back. There is nothing booked in the Saddle Dome from May 14th until June. So Game 5 absolutely could have been played there. So for whatever reason Calgary has for doing this, it's not travel costs. They have to fly to Coachella Valley and back no matter what. And it's not arena availability, as the Saddle Dome is open when games 3, 4, and 5 are all scheduled for. They had to fly to Coachella Valley no matter what happens and fly back. So why did they pick this schedule? I do not know. But now Calgary is required to win a road game to close out the series. And it's our X factor, because there's absolutely no way I believe Calgary can go up 2-0 and get reverse swept by Coachella Valley. This series is too close. Calgary is too well coached for that. Fun fact, since Mitch Love became the Flames' AHL affiliate head coach, they've closed all 3 of his playoff series wins on the road after winning the first 2 at home. They've lost 1 home playoff game in that span, and that was to the eventual Calder Cup champions last season, the Chicago Wolves. So if you are Coachella Valley, you 100% need to steal a game in Calgary, because the Wranglers will finish your season in your own house if you don't. They've done it before. It has literally been the script of their playoff story since Mitch Love started coaching in the AHL. They will do it again if you let them. Road wins are the X factor for this series, because both teams are going to need one. All right, Sarah, brass tacks moment. I will let you go first. Who are you taking and why?
All right, so this is the series that I think in some ways, speaking for myself, definitely me, I think you as well, that we have been anticipating this series basically all season. I have been on the Calgary train all season, and I am sticking with it. We have seen 2 series in a row now where Coachella Valley could and should have closed the series out in less than the full series length, but didn't get the job done. You can afford that against Tucson. You can get by with some close games against Colorado, but you cannot take your foot off the gas against Calgary for a second. Coachella Valley is a great team. They have been an awesome story in the league this year. If you missed the episode a while ago, like I went out there for a couple of games. It's an amazing atmosphere, beautiful new arena. Their fan base is super passionate, like just instantly fans of the team just sprung up. It is a great story for this league. particularly thinking about success of hockey in non-traditional markets. They're blowing it out of the water, but I think that Calgary comes out of this series. I can't pick anything other than Calgary. They have been too good this year.
For me, if you've heard any of the picks I've made in the series that we've already covered, I have been very torn in all of them. This is the only series in which I have very good amount of confidence in my pick. Coachella Valley's had an amazing first season. It's created a solid fan base, as Sarah said. Their playoff atmosphere has been electric. Their broadcast is good. Dan Bilesma is an excellent AHL head coach. They have been everything Seattle could have ever dreamed of. This team has battled through adversity in Colorado, and it showed as a top team in this league right now, and it deserves to be here. I'm taking Calgary anyway. Abbotsford was an incredibly tough team that had an amazing home atmosphere and threw everything in the world at Calgary that they could. They got stellar goaltending, played as physical as you could, and then some, and they made Calgary look mortal at times, and it wasn't enough. I've said the entire time that the Pacific Division portion of the playoff bracket here feels like it's just teams waiting to be cut down by Calgary, and nothing I've seen has changed that. Coachella Valley has been excellent this entire time, and I think they give Calgary a 5-game series and everything they can handle and more. But for them, I don't think Coachella Valley giving them everything is enough. I do not think their best is enough. Calgary takes the series in 5. And the model is on our side. 55.4% favorite for Calgary in the series. If memory serves me correctly, it liked Abbotsford by like a smidge last time around, and I feel like the way that series played out, Abbotsford at least earned that, 0.1% favorite that it was. It showed that it belonged. I think Coachella Valley is going to show that it belongs in this series, but I can't watch what Calgary's done and say they're going down. That is it for the show. Sarah, do you have any closing thoughts here?
We did it. That's my closing thought.
There we go. Take us home.
So thank you so much for watching the show. That is it for us today. The Calder Farmstead is a part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and several other great hockey, sports, and sports entertainment programs, all at www.fullpresscoverage.com. Just click the podcast drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website and enjoy.
And if you guys are enjoying the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon, please rate and review the podcast. If you're watching it on YouTube, like the video, comment what you thought of the episode. Doing so helps others find the show, and your reviews help us improve it. You can also follow the show on social media at Calder Farmstead on Twitter, at The Calder Farmstead on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more can be found on our Linktree page, which is linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's AD_DYSFUNCTION. So we can make music for you too. Sarah, where can the people find you?
All right, so my name is Sarah Avampato. You can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at Write Said Sarah. That's WRITE, Said Sarah with an H. You can check out my writing at Full Press Hockey, where I talk about the Ontario Reign, or moonlighted as a Texas Stars writer for the playoffs lately, or over at Canes Country, where I talk about the Chicago Wolves. Sean, where can people find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien, and you can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien 81. That's SeanObrien 81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien _81. Sean O'Brien 81 on Instagram is a different dude. You can find all of my stats work on Tableau. That is the money puck graph that everyone seems to really enjoy and surprisingly understand. No offense to everyone out there, but I've seen the stuff that money puck goes through. I was expecting some of that grief and have not gotten it yet. I'm good with that. But you can find all of that. There are new graphs up for the playoffs for players, goalies, special teams, penalties. All of that and more can be found on my Tableau page at bit.ly/datadump-and-chase, all lowercase, all one word. It is 3:00 in the morning on the day that we are releasing this episode. I just want to point that out in posterity. I know the only people listening are CC at this point, but we work really hard, and I have to say thank you to Sarah for sticking with me at this ridiculous hour. Both of us have to go to work in 4 or 5 hours, something like that, and we're here recording this dumb podcast for you because it is truly a labor of love. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for appreciating the show. For Sarah Avampato, I am Sean O'Brien. Please dump and chase responsibly.